The council chamber of the HFY Confederacy had never seen such fear. 7 different species sat around the crystal table, their normally calm faces twisted with worry. The air itself seemed heavy with the weight of their desperation. Council leader Zalthara pressed her thin fingers against the smooth surface of the table. Her green skin had turned pale, almost yellow with stress. Around her, the other leaders shifted nervously in their seats. Some had feathers that stood on end. Others had their eye stalks drooping low. All of them knew they were running out of time. 3 worlds, whispered Elder Vextai, his voice barely audible. 3 entire worlds in just 2 cycles. Millions of our people, gone. The holographic display in the center of the table showed the horror. Red marks covered what used to be blue and green planets. The Vorthak swarm had consumed everything. No life remained. No cities, no forests, no oceans, just dead rock floating in space. How many ships did we lose trying to stop them? Asked another council member. 412 vessels, came the reply from General Coldane. His forearms hung limp at his sides. Most didn't even damage their shells. Our strongest weapons just bounced off like rain. Zalthara stood up slowly. Her legs felt weak, but she had to stay strong for her people. Show us the projections again. The display changed. Now it showed possible futures. All of them were bad. Red lines moved across the map like a disease. In the best case, the Confederacy would lose half their worlds. In the worst case, everything would be gone in 30 cycles. The Vorthak don't just kill, Dr. Ithapal said from his corner. He was the leading expert on the creatures. They consume. They take everything. The planets they leave behind are nothing but empty shells. No atmosphere, no water, no minerals, nothing. The chamber fell silent. Outside the windows, they could see their beautiful capital world. Floating gardens hung in the air between tall spires. Children from different species played together in parks filled with strange and wonderful plants. It was everything the Confederacy stood for: peace, cooperation, and harmony between all living things. Soon it might all be gone. There is one option left, said Elder Morthy. She was the oldest being in the chamber, and her voice carried the wisdom of centuries. The beacon. Everyone turned to look at her. The beacon was ancient technology they had found in ruins on the edge of their space. It was older than any of their civilizations, older than their recorded history. Most thought it was just a curiosity for museums. The archaeologists say it can send messages across the entire galaxy, Morthay continued, to any species that might hear us. A call for help, Zalthara said quietly. To anyone who might be strong enough to fight the Vorthak. But we know so little about what else lives out there, protested Vextai. What if we contact something worse than the Vorthak? Zalthara looked around the chamber. Fear filled every face, but she also saw determination. These beings had spent generations building something beautiful together. They would not let it die without a fight. Worse than extinction? She asked. I don't think that's possible. The vote was quick, unanimous. They would activate the beacon. 2 hours later, Zalthara stood in the ancient ruins where the beacon waited. The device was strange, made of materials that seemed to shift and change in the light. Symbols covered its surface in patterns that hurt to look at for too long. Dr. Ithpal worked at a modern control panel they had connected to the ancient machine. His 6 eyes were focused on the readings. The power buildup is incredible, he said. I think this thing could punch a signal through to the other side of the galaxy. What should we say? Asked General Coldane. Zalthara had thought about this during the flight here. What could they offer that would make someone risk their lives to help strangers? What did they have that might be valuable to unknown aliens? We tell them the truth, she said. We tell them we are dying. We tell them we will give everything we have to whoever can save us. Our knowledge, our resources, our friendship, everything. The message was simple. This is the HFY Confederacy. We are 7 peaceful species facing extinction. The Vorthak swarm consumes all life in its path. Our weapons cannot stop them. We offer all our knowledge, all our resources to any who can save us from extinction. Please help us. Dr. Ithpal's hands moved over the controls. Sending now, the beacon came alive. Light poured from its surface in colors that had no names. Energy readings spiked beyond their instrument's ability to measure. For a moment, the air itself seemed to sing with power. Then it was over. The beacon went dark. The ruins fell silent except for the wind. How long before we get a response? Asked Coldane. If we get a response, Ithapal said quietly. The signal will take time to reach distant worlds. Then more time for anyone to send ships. Days, at least. Maybe weeks, Zalthara nodded. Then we wait, and we pray that someone out there is listening. They didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, responses began arriving. Most were from species they had heard of before, trading partners and distant neighbors. The messages were similar. We are sorry, but we cannot help. The Vorthak are too strong. We wish you peace in your final cycles. Some responses were worse. The Vorthak cannot be stopped, wrote the Zelani Republic. Save yourselves while you can. Run to the edge of the galaxy and hide. By the 5th day, hope was fading. Zalthara sat in her office, reading the same disappointing messages over and over. Outside her window, she could see ships leaving the system. Citizens who had given up, who were taking their families and running as far as they could. She couldn't blame them. Then Dr. Ithpal burst into her office without knocking. His feathers were standing straight up with excitement. Council leader, we have a response. Another refusal? She asked tiredly. No, he said, his voice cracking with emotion. Someone's coming. Someone's actually coming. Zalthara jumped to her feet. Who? What species? How many ships? Ithpal looked down at his tablet, confused. They call themselves humans, from a world called Earth? I've never heard of them. The database has no records. How many ships are they sending? They didn't say. The message was very short. He read from his tablet. Help is coming. Hold your positions. Zalthara felt her first moment of hope in weeks. Someone was coming. Someone was willing to fight the Vorthak. It didn't matter that she had never heard of these humans. It didn't matter that their world was unknown. They were coming. When will they arrive? She asked. The message came from coordinates in the outer rim, based on the transmission lag. Maybe 6 days? 6 days. The Vorthak scouts had been spotted near the 4th planet. The swarm itself couldn't be far behind. It would be close, but help was coming. Send a message to all our remaining fleets, Zalthara ordered. Tell them to hold the line. Tell them our allies are coming. She didn't know what these humans were like. She didn't know what kind of weapons they had or how they fought. But for the first time since this nightmare began, she felt something besides fear. She felt hope. In 6 days, she would discover that hope could be a very dangerous thing. The human fleet arrived exactly when they said they would. Zalthara stood on the bridge of the peaceful dawn, watching the sensors as unknown ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Her excitement quickly turned to confusion, then to something close to horror. Those aren't ships, whispered General Koldane. Those are weapons. The human vessels looked wrong. Where Ketharai ships were smooth and curved like flower petals, these things were angular and brutal. Dark metal surfaces covered in armor plating. Weapon mounts jutted out from every angle. No decorative elements. No artistic flourishes. Just pure function designed for violence. How many? Zalthara asked. 47 ships, reported the sensor operator. But each one is massive. The largest is 3 times the size of our flagship. Are they sending a message? Yes, Council Leader. They want to come aboard for a meeting. Zalthara looked around the bridge. Her officers looked as worried as she felt. What kind of beings built ships like weapons? What kind of species thought war was so important that they made their vessels look like floating nightmares? Tell them they are welcome, she said finally. Prepare the main conference room. An hour later, Zalthara got her first look at humanity. The airlock opened with a hiss and 5 figures stepped through. They walked on 2 legs like some Ketharai species, but everything else about them was wrong. They were tall, over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and thick muscles. Their eyes faced forward like predators. When one of them smiled, Zalthara saw sharp white teeth designed for cutting meat. The leader stepped forward. She was a human female with short dark hair and scars on her hands. Council Leader Zalthara, I'm Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force. These are my senior officers. Zalthara tried to speak, but her voice caught. These beings looked dangerous. Everything about them suggested violence. The way they moved, the way they stood, even the way they looked around the room, always watching for threats. Thank you for coming, she managed finally. We are desperate for help against the Vorthak swarm. Admiral Chen nodded. We've studied the data you transmitted. Interesting enemy. We have some experience with hive mind species. Experience? Asked Elder Vextai. You've fought creatures like the Vorthak before? The human admiral's smile widened, showing more of those sharp teeth. Oh yes, Earth has quite a few hive species. Ants, termites, bees. Most are harmless. Some aren't. Dr. Ithpal leaned forward. But surely nothing as large as the Vorthak. These creatures are the size of starships. True, Chen said. But size doesn't matter much. It's all about tactics and knowing your enemy's weaknesses. She turned to one of her officers. Colonel Martinez, show them the preliminary battle plans. The human activated a holographic projector. The display showed the local star system with red markers for Vorthak forces and blue markers for human ships. Zalthara watched in growing horror as the colonel explained their strategy. We'll hit them here first, Martinez said, pointing to an asteroid field. Draw them into a kill zone. When they bunch up to attack, we deploy the thermite charges and... Thermite charges? Vextai interrupted. What are those? Incendiary weapons, Chen explained casually. They burn extremely hot. Should cut through Vorthak carapaces like butter. The Ketharai leaders exchanged worried glances. These humans spoke about killing as easily as discussing the weather. They had words for different types of destruction. They planned violence with the same casual attitude other species used for planning trade routes. What about casualties? Asked General Koldane. How many of your ships are you willing to lose? Admiral Chen looked confused. Lose? We don't plan to lose any ships. But surely some will be damaged. Some crew members will be hurt. Oh, you mean acceptable losses? Chen waved her hand dismissively. We estimate maybe 10% casualties in the initial engagement. Higher if the Vorthak are smarter than they look. Zalthara felt sick. 10% of thousands of beings, and this human called it acceptable. What kind of species thought this way? Perhaps, she said carefully, we should discuss other options? Maybe we could negotiate with the Vorthak, find some way to coexist? The humans looked at each other. One of them, a young male with multiple scars on his face, actually laughed. Ma'am, he said, I don't think you understand what we're dealing with. The Vorthak don't negotiate. They don't take prisoners. They don't even eat their victims in any normal sense. They literally consume everything. Matter, energy, information. Talking to them would be like trying to negotiate with a forest fire. Admiral Chen nodded. Lieutenant Morrison is correct. We've seen this before. Some species are just incompatible with life as we know it. The only choice is to fight or die. But surely, Elder Morthy said, there must be a peaceful solution. Violence should be the last resort, not the first choice. The Admiral looked at the elderly Ketharai with something that might have been pity. Ma'am, with respect, the Vorthak made the choice for violence when they started consuming inhabited worlds. We didn't start this war. We're just here to finish it. Dr. Ithpal spoke up nervously. What about civilian casualties? Our worlds have billions of non-combatants. We'll do our best to minimize collateral damage, Chen said. But I need you to understand something. War isn't clean. War isn't pretty. People die. Good people. Innocent people. The only way to save most of your civilians is to kill the enemy fast and hard before they can spread further. Zalthara felt the weight of decision pressing down on her. These humans were offering to save her people, but at a cost she wasn't sure she could accept. They spoke of violence like it was natural. They planned death like it was inevitable. But what choice did she have? The Vorthak were coming whether she liked these humans or not. What do you need from us? She asked quietly. Intelligence, Chen said immediately. Everything you know about Vorthak tactics, biology, and technology. Also, we'll need some of your ships to serve as decoys. Decoys? Colonel Martinez stepped forward. The plan requires drawing the Vorthak into specific positions. We need ships they'll want to attack. Civilian vessels, medical ships, anything that looks valuable and defenseless. You want us to use our own people as bait? General Koldane's voice was barely controlled. The decoy ships will be unmanned, Chen said quickly. We're not asking you to sacrifice your crews. Just your hardware. The meeting continued for 2 more hours. The humans explained their tactics in detail. Ambushes, hit-and-run attacks, psychological warfare. They spoke of acceptable losses and strategic sacrifices and overwhelming force multipliers. Every suggestion made the Ketharai more uncomfortable. These beings didn't just accept violence, they embraced it. They had turned warfare into a science. When the humans finally left, Zalthara sat alone in the conference room for a long time. Outside the windows, she could see the human fleet taking positions around the system. Those dark, brutal ships looked like mechanical predators waiting to strike. What have we done? She whispered to herself. Elder Morthe entered the room quietly. We have chosen survival, she said. Whatever the cost, but at what price? These humans. They're not like us. They think differently. They see violence as normal. Perhaps, Morthy said, settling into a chair. But they also see victory as possible. That's more than we could say before they arrived. Zalthara nodded reluctantly. The humans were terrifying, but they were also confident. They looked at the Vorthak swarm and saw not an unstoppable force but a problem to be solved. A puzzle to be unraveled through superior tactics and overwhelming firepower. Do you think they can win? She asked. Morthy was quiet for a moment. I think, she said finally, that the Vorthak have never faced anything like humans before. And that might be exactly what we need. 3 days later, the sensors detected the first Vorthak scouts entering the system. Admiral Chen's voice came over the communications channel, calm and professional. All units, this is actual. Contact confirmed. Enemy scouts detected at coordinates 77 Alpha. All ships move to battle stations. Remember, we've got civilians counting on us. Let's show these bugs what happens when they mess with someone under our protection. Zalthara watched from the bridge as the human ships began to move. They didn't flee from the approaching Vorthak scouts. They didn't hide behind defensive positions, they charged straight at them. What are they doing? Asked her tactical officer. Zalthara didn't answer. She was beginning to understand something about humans that both terrified and amazed her. They weren't just willing to fight the Vorthak. They were looking forward to it. The first battle changed everything the Ketharai thought they knew about warfare. Zalthara watched from the bridge of the peaceful dawn as the human fleet engaged the Vorthak scouts. She expected to see the same thing that had happened to every other force that faced the swarm. Quick destruction followed by retreat. Instead, she saw something impossible. The humans were winning. How are they doing that? General Coldane asked, staring at the tactical display in disbelief. The Vorthak scout ship was massive, a living vessel the size of a city, covered in thick crystalline armor that had turned away every weapon the Confederacy possessed. Bioacid dripped from its hull, eating through space itself wherever it touched, but the human ships didn't run from the acid clouds. They flew straight through them. Admiral Chen, Zalthara called over the communications channel. Your ships are taking damage from the bioacid. You need to retreat. Chen's voice came back calm and steady. Negative, Council Leader. We're reading minimal hull breach. These old girls were built to take punishment. Zalthara watched in amazement as a human destroyer emerged from a cloud of acid with half its armor plating eaten away. Atmosphere vented from dozens of holes in its hull. By any reasonable standard, the ship should have been evacuating its crew and limping away from battle. Instead, it accelerated toward the Vorthak vessel and opened fire. Are they insane? Whispered Dr. Ithpal. The human weapons were different too. Where Ketharai energy beams scattered harmlessly off Vorthak carapaces, the human kinetic rounds punched straight through. Explosions bloomed across the creature's surface as depleted uranium shells found their mark. Target their feeding orifices, came Admiral Chen's voice over the tactical channel. Remember, these things need to eat constantly. Hit their mouths and they'll starve. The Vorthak scout tried to respond with its bioweapons. Acid streams shot out like liquid lightning, seeking human ships. But the humans were ready. Their vessels jinked and rolled with an agility that seemed impossible for something so large. How do they move like that? Asked the tactical officer. Zalthara was beginning to understand. The human ships weren't just built to survive damage. They were built to fight while damaged. Redundant systems kept them operational even as sections of hull melted away. Crews worked in sealed compartments, breathing recycled air and fixing what could be fixed while ignoring what couldn't. They're used to this, she realized out loud. They expect their ships to get hurt. The battle reached its climax when a human cruiser, the Singapore, took a direct hit from a Vorthak acid cannon. The weapon ate through the ship's armor like it was paper. Atmosphere screamed out into space. The ship's reactor began to overload. Any sane crew would have abandoned ship. Instead, the Singapore rammed the Vorthak scout. What are they doing? Screamed Coldane. The two ships collided in a spectacular explosion of light and energy. When the sensors cleared, both vessels were gone. Nothing remained but glowing debris and expanding clouds of superheated gas. For a moment, the bridge was silent. Then Admiral Chen's voice came over the channel. Good work, Singapore. Your sacrifice will be remembered. Zalthara felt sick. They destroyed their own ship. Their own people. Negative, came a new voice. This was Captain Rodriguez from the human medical ship Mercy. We recovered 43 survivors from Singapore's escape pods. Total casualties, 12 crew members. Could have been worse, could have been worse. 12 beings had died, and this human called it acceptable. But as the day continued, Zalthara began to see the larger picture. More Vorthak scouts arrived, but the humans were ready for them. They had studied the first battle and adapted their tactics. When bioacid proved dangerous, they switched to long-range missiles. When the Vorthak tried to swarm them, they used the system's asteroid field as cover. When conventional weapons weren't enough, they did things that made the Ketharai officers gasp in horror. "Aztec, this is Normandy," came a voice over the tactical channel. "We're seeing heavy resistance from that cluster. Recommend we use the special package." "Confirmed, Normandy. Special package is authorized. All ships clear the target zone." Zalthara watched as the human ships retreated from a group of Vorthak vessels. She was about to ask what was happening when space itself seemed to catch fire. The special package turned out to be a weapon that converted matter directly into energy. The explosion was so bright it temporarily blinded the sensors. When they cleared, 5 Vorthak ships had simply ceased to exist. "What was that?" Dr. Ithapal asked in a shaking voice. "Antimatter warhead," Admiral Chen explained casually. "We don't use them often, too dangerous. But sometimes you need to make a statement." The Ketharai looked at each other in stunned silence. These humans carried weapons that could erase entire ships from existence. They spoke of such terrible power, like it was just another tool in their arsenal. But the real revelation came during the ground assault. When the Vorthak sent warrior forms to attack the human support base on asteroid Capacidan, Captain Jake Morrison led a counterattack that defied everything the Ketharai thought they knew about combat. "Suit up, Marines." Morrison's voice came over the communication channel. "We're going bug hunting." Zalthara watched through drone cameras as human soldiers in powered armor charged directly at Vorthak warrior forms. The creatures were nightmarish. 12 feet tall, covered in natural armor with claws that could cut through steel. The humans ran straight at them. Are they enjoying this?" asked Elder Vextai. It certainly looked that way. The human soldiers moved through the asteroid's low gravity like they were born for it. They used weapons Zalthara had never seen. Plasma rifles that cut through Vorthak carapaces, explosive charges that turned corridors into kill zones, and close combat weapons that seemed designed for pure brutality. But more than their weapons, it was their attitude that shocked her. They fought with a casual competence that spoke of long experience. When a corridor filled with acid vapor, they simply sealed their suits and kept fighting. When artificial gravity failed, they adapted immediately to zero-G combat. Contact left. Morrison's voice was calm despite the chaos around him. "Jenkins, grenade that cluster." Rodriguez, watch the ceiling. They like to drop from above. "How do they know these things?" Zalthara asked. Dr. Ithpal was studying his readings. "Council leader, I'm getting some very strange data from their home system. The background radiation suggests their world is highly radioactive. Radioactive? And the gravity reading is 0.98 standard. Their planet is almost twice the gravity of our homeworld." Zalthara felt a chill of understanding. "They evolved in a dangerous environment." "More than dangerous," Ithpal said, his voice filled with awe and horror. "According to these readings, their homeworld would be classified as a Class 13 death world. Everything on that planet is trying to kill everything else." Suddenly, the humans' behavior made sense. They fought like this because they had evolved to fight. Their entire species had been shaped by millions of years of surviving on a world that actively tried to kill them. The battle on Kappa 7 ended when Captain Morrison's team penetrated the Vorthak breeding chamber. What they did there was so violent that the drone cameras were cut off. When contact was reestablished, Morrison's voice was tired but satisfied. "Base cleared. Repeat, base is clear. We'll need a cleanup crew for the breeding chamber, but the threat is neutralized." "Casualties?" asked Admiral Chen. 3 wounded, none serious. Jenkins took some acid splash on his armor, but the suit held. Rodriguez has a cracked rib from a fall. Smith lost 2 fingers to a warrior form, but the medical nanites have already stopped the bleeding. Lost 2 fingers and kept fighting. Zalthara couldn't understand it, but as the days passed and the battles continued, she began to see something else in the humans. Yes, they were violent. Yes, they accepted casualties that would horrify any civilized species. But they also had something the Ketharai had lost. They had hope. "Why do you do it?" she asked Admiral Chen during a brief lull between battles. "Why do you risk so much for strangers?" Chen looked at her with those predator eyes. Because that's what you do, she said simply. When someone needs help, you help them. When something threatens innocent people, you stop it. It doesn't matter if they're human or alien. Life is precious. But you're so willing to sacrifice your own lives. We're willing to risk our lives, Chen corrected. There's a difference. We don't want to die. We just want to live in a universe where beings like the Vorthak can't consume entire civilizations without consequence. That night, Zalthara stood at her office window watching the human fleet. Those brutal, ugly ships suddenly looked different to her. They weren't just weapons of war. They were shields, barriers standing between darkness and light. The humans were Deathworlders, beings shaped by violence and hardship. But they had chosen to use their terrible skills to protect others. For the first time since this nightmare began, Zalthara thought they might actually win. Outside her window, a human patrol ship drifted past. Its hull was scarred and blackened from recent battles. Atmosphere leaked from a dozen small breaches. But its weapons were still powered and its crew was still fighting. The ship's name was painted on its hull in bold letters. Never surrender. Zalthara smiled. Perhaps that said everything about humanity that needed to be said. The war was changing everyone. Dr. Zeftai sat in his laboratory aboard the Peaceful Dawn, staring at data that made no sense. He was the Confederacy's leading expert on alien biology, but everything he thought he knew was being turned upside down. These readings can't be right, he muttered, checking his instruments for the third time. The data was from Earth, the human homeworld. Admiral Chen had provided detailed sensor sweeps as part of their intelligence sharing agreement. What Zeftai saw in those readings terrified him more than the Vorthak. Earth wasn't just dangerous. It was actively hostile to life. The gravity was crushing, nearly twice what most civilized species could survive. The atmosphere was 21% oxygen, so reactive it was almost an explosive gas. The surface was covered with deadly radiation from the system's star. Violent storms raged across the continents with winds that could flatten cities, and that was just the beginning. The biological readings showed predators that hunted in packs, poisonous creatures that could kill with a touch, microscopic organisms that consumed living tissue. The planet's history was marked by mass extinction events, ice ages, asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions that had wiped out entire ecosystems. No wonder they fight like that, Zeftai whispered. A soft chime announced someone entering his lab. He looked up to see Sergeant Lisa Rodriguez, one of the human Marines recovering from injuries sustained in the last battle. She moved carefully, favoring her left side where Vorthak acid had eaten through her armor. "Doctor," she said. "Admiral Chen said you had some questions about human biology?" Zeftai gestured to a chair. "Please sit. And thank you for coming. I hope you're feeling better." Rodriguez lowered herself into the chair with a wince. "Getting there. Your medical technology is amazing. On Earth, injuries like this would take months to heal. Here, I'll be back in action in a few days." "That's actually what I wanted to ask about," Zeftai said. "Your species' attitude toward injury and death. It's very different from ours." Rodriguez laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Different how?" "You accept casualties that we would consider catastrophic. Yesterday, Captain Morrison's team lost 8 soldiers taking that Vorthak nest. He reported it as a successful mission." "It was successful," Rodriguez said simply. "We eliminated a breeding site and prevented thousands of new warriors from being born. 8 dead saved thousands of lives." Zeftai pulled up a holographic display of Earth. "I've been studying your homeworld. I think I'm beginning to understand why you think the way you do." Rodriguez looked at the image of her planet with something that might have been homesickness. "Beautiful, isn't it?" "Beautiful?" Zeftai stared at her in shock. "Sergeant, your world is classified as a Class 13 death world, the most dangerous category in our database. Nothing should be able to live there, let alone evolve intelligence." "Shows what you know," Rodriguez said with a grin. "Earth doesn't just support life, it makes life stronger. Every species on our planet evolved to survive impossible odds. We didn't just adapt to danger. We learned to thrive on it. But at what cost?" Zeftai asked. "Your species views violence as normal. You accept death as inevitable. You make weapons out of everything." Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. "Doctor, can I ask you something? How many wars has your species fought in the last 1,000 years?" "Wars?" Zeftai looked confused. "We haven't had a real war since the unification, over 800 years ago. Small conflicts, yes, but nothing that could be called a war. And how did that work out when the Vorthak arrived? The question hit like a physical blow. Zeftai thought about the 3 worlds already lost, the billions of dead, the fleets that had been swept aside like toys. We weren't prepared, he admitted. Exactly. You built a peaceful civilization and that's admirable. But you forgot that the universe isn't always peaceful. Humans never had that luxury. Rodriguez stood and walked to the viewport. Outside, human ships patrolled the system's edge, their weapons ready, their crews alert for threats. On Earth, everything is trying to kill you, she continued. The weather, the animals, the plants, even the bacteria. Humans survived by becoming the most dangerous thing on the planet. We learned to make tools, to fight in groups, to adapt to any environment. But surely that made you savage? Rodriguez turned back to him. Did it? When your people called for help, who answered? When the Vorthak threatened innocent civilians, who stood up to fight them? We could have ignored your signal. We could have stayed home where it was safe. Zeftai felt ashamed. I apologize. I didn't mean to suggest. It's okay, Rodriguez said, returning to her chair. I understand why we seem frightening. We are frightening when we need to be, but that's not all we are. She pulled out a small device, a personal data pad. The screen showed images of Earth, but not the dangerous wilderness Zeftai had been studying. These were cities full of art and music, gardens where children played, centers of learning where beings from different cultures worked together. We learned to fight because we had to, Rodriguez explained, but we learned to build because we wanted to. Every human city is a victory over our world's attempts to kill us. Every work of art is proof that we're more than just survivors. Zeftai looked at the images with new understanding. You've turned a death world into a garden. Patches of garden, Rodriguez corrected. Earth is still dangerous, but that's what makes it beautiful. We know how precious life is because we know how easily it can be lost. A communication alert interrupted them. Admiral Chen's voice filled the lab. All senior staff to the briefing room. We've received intelligence on the main Vorthak fleet. Rodriguez stood carefully. Want to see how Deathworlders plan a war, Doctor? The briefing room was packed with human and Ketharai officers. Admiral Chen stood at the front, her face grim as she indicated the holographic display showing the approaching Vorthak armada. Long-range sensors have detected the main swarm, she announced. 437 bioships, including 12 superorganisms. They'll reach the system in 6 days. Shocked murmurs filled the room. The human fleet numbered only 47 ships. The odds were impossible. However, Chen continued, we have advantages. Thanks to Dr. Ithpal's research, we've identified weaknesses in their hive-mind communication system, and Captain Morrison's team has developed new tactics based on their ground combat experience. Captain Morrison stepped forward. His face was scarred from recent battles, but his voice was steady. The Vorthak think in terms of mass and overwhelming force. They don't adapt well to unconventional tactics. We can use that against them. What are you proposing? Asked General Coldane. Morrison activated a new display showing the system's asteroid belt. We're going to turn their numbers against them. Draw them into the belt where their larger ships can't maneuver effectively. Then we hit them with everything we have. That's suicide, protested Elder Vexitai. Those asteroids are full of radiation and unstable ores. One wrong move and we die, Morrison finished. But if we don't try, we die anyway. At least this way, we take them with us. Salthara spoke up from her position near the back. What do you need from us? Chen looked directly at her. Everything. We need your remaining fleet to serve as the initial attack wave. Draw their attention. Make them think they're winning. Meanwhile, our ships will be hidden among the asteroids. You're asking us to be bait, Coldane said quietly. Yes, Chen replied without hesitation. I'm asking your people to fly into certain death so that humanity can get into position for an attack that might not work. The room fell silent. The humans were asking the Ketharai to sacrifice themselves for a plan with no guarantee of success. There is another option, Chen continued. You could evacuate. Take your people and run to the edge of the galaxy. Live as refugees, but live. Salthara looked around the room at her officers, her friends, her people. They had built something beautiful together. A civilization based on peace and cooperation. Now they were being asked to throw it all away on a desperate gamble. But the alternative was extinction. How long do we need to hold them? She asked. 4 hours, Morrison replied. Maybe 5 if things go wrong. 4 hours. Flying against impossible odds, knowing they would probably die. just to give the humans a chance at victory. We'll do it, Zalthara said quietly. The decision rippled through the room. Cathari officers began discussing logistics, evacuation procedures for non-essential personnel, final messages to families. The humans watched with something that might have been respect. Later, as the meeting broke up, Sergeant Rodriguez approached Zeftai. "Still think we're too violent, Doctor?" Zeftai looked at the scene around him. Beings from two very different civilizations working together to plan their own destruction in the hope of saving others. "I think," he said slowly, "that violence and peace aren't opposites. They're tools. What matters is how you use them." Rodriguez smiled. "Now you're starting to think like a human." As Zeftai returned to his laboratory, he reflected on what he had learned. The humans were Deathworlders, shaped by violence and hardship into something fierce and uncompromising. But they had chosen to use their terrible skills to protect others. The Cathari were peaceful beings who had built a civilization based on harm. The final battle began at dawn. Zalthara stood on the bridge of the peaceful dawn, watching as the Vorthak armada emerged from faster-than-light travel. 437 bioships filled the sensors, each one a living nightmare of crystalline armor and acid weapons. The largest superorganisms were the size of small moons. "All Confederacy ships, this is Council Leader Zalthara," she broadcast on the general channel. "Today we fight not just for our worlds, but for the right of peaceful beings to exist in this universe. Our human allies have given us hope. Now we must give them time. Remember, we are not just bait. We are the shield that protects everything we've built together." Across the fleet, Cathari crews made final preparations. Ships that had been designed for exploration and trade now bristled with improvised weapons. Civilian vessels had been converted into fire ships, their holds packed with explosives. Medical frigates carried not patients but fusion bombs. It was everything the Confederacy had once stood against, and it was their only hope. "Vorthak fleet is moving into the system," reported the tactical officer. "They're targeting our outer colonies first." Zalthara nodded. According to plan, the human fleet was hidden deep in the asteroid belt, using the radiation and ore deposits to mask their signatures. But they needed the Vorthak to commit fully to the attack before they could spring their trap. "All ships advance," she ordered. "Make them think we're mounting a real defense." The Confederacy fleet moved forward, 112 vessels against more than 4 times that number. Every captain knew they were flying to their deaths, but they did it anyway. The first contact came as the fleets closed to weapons range. Vorthak bioships opened fire with streams of acid that ate through space itself. Cathari vessels responded with energy beams and kinetic projectiles, weapons that had proven useless in earlier battles. But that wasn't the point. The point was to look threatening enough to draw the Vorthak deeper into the system. "Garden of Peace is taking heavy damage," came a voice over the communications channel. "Hull breach on multiple decks. We're losing life support." Harmony's light reporting critical damage to engines. "We're dead in space, a wisdom seeker is gone. Direct hit from a superorganism. No survivors." Ship after ship fell to the Vorthak assault. The Confederacy fleet fought bravely, but they were completely outmatched. Zalthara watched her people die and forced herself to remain calm. This was the plan. This was what victory looked like. "How much longer?" asked General Coldain, his forearms gripping the bridge railing. 2 more hours, Zalthara replied. "We just need to hold them for 2 more hours." But the Vorthak were advancing faster than expected. Their superorganisms pushed through the Cathari defensive line like it wasn't there. Bioships swarmed around damaged vessels, consuming them completely. "Council Leader," came Admiral Chen's voice on a private channel. "Your people are dying faster than projected. We need to move up the timeline. How much more time do you need?" 1 hour, maybe less. Zalthara looked at the tactical display. In 1 hour, there would be no Confederacy fleet left. They had to hold for 1 more hour with ships that were already falling apart. "All vessels, this is the Council Leader," she broadcast. "New orders. We're not retreating. We're not surrendering. Every minute we hold them here is another minute for our children to grow up free. Fight for that." The response was immediate. Ships that had been trying to withdraw turned back toward the enemy. Damaged vessels that should have been evacuating their crews instead charged directly at Vorthak bioships. The peaceful dawn itself, its hull cracked and atmosphere leaking, accelerated toward the largest superorganism. "What are you doing?" Coldain demanded. What humans taught us, Zalthara replied. Sometimes the only way to win is to be willing to lose everything. The next 40 minutes were the longest of Zalthara's life. She watched as ship after ship made final stands against impossible odds. Captain Velthane of the Sacred Grove rammed his damaged frigate into a Vorthak bioship, taking out its feeding organs. The crew of the Starlight Meditation manually detonated their reactor when Vorthak warriors boarded their ship. Each sacrifice bought precious minutes. Each death brought the trap closer to springing. Then, with only 37 Confederacy ships still fighting, space itself seemed to explode. The human fleet burst from the asteroid belt like predators emerging from cover, 47 warships moving at maximum speed, their weapons already firing. They had used the asteroids not just as concealment, but as ammunition, accelerating chunks of rock and metal to relativistic speeds. The first wave of kinetic projectiles tore through the Vorthak rearguard before the bioships even knew they were under attack. Admiral Chen's voice filled the communications channels, calm and professional despite the chaos. All units, this is actual. Phoenix Protocol is now in effect. I repeat, Phoenix Protocol. Burn them all. What followed was unlike any battle the galaxy had ever seen. The humans had studied every engagement, analyzed every Vorthak weakness, and prepared weapons specifically designed to exploit them. When bioacid proved dangerous, they used weapons that fired through it. When Vorthak armor resisted energy weapons, they switched to kinetic rounds that punched straight through. When the creatures tried to swarm, the humans turned the asteroids into a maze that favored smaller, more maneuverable ships. But it was more than just superior tactics. The humans fought with a creativity born from millions of years of surviving on a world that tried to kill them. They used Cathari medical nanites as biological weapons, reprogramming them to attack Vorthak nervous systems. They turned mining charges into ship killers. They even weaponized their own damaged vessels, using them as guided missiles. Captain Morrison led a boarding action against a Vorthak superorganism, fighting through its living corridors to plant fusion charges at its heart. Sergeant Rodriguez, still recovering from her injuries, coordinated the attack from the Mercy, turning a hospital ship into a command center. But the most incredible sight was Admiral Chen herself. When her flagship took critical damage, she transferred her flag to a damaged Cathari vessel and continued, commanding the battle from a ship held together by emergency patches and hope. Defiant. Is going critical, came a voice over the tactical channel. Reactor containment failing. Roger that, Defiant, Chen replied. Take as many with you as you can. The human destroyer's reactor overloaded in the middle of a cluster of Vorthak bioships. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. As the battle raged, something unexpected began to happen. The Vorthak hive mind communication system, which had made them nearly invincible, began to break down under the stress of coordinating such a massive fleet while under constant attack. Dr. Ithpal, monitoring the situation from the peaceful dawn, made a startling discovery. Council Leader, the humans' jamming frequencies are interfering with the Vorthak neural network. Individual bioships are starting to act independently. Zalthara watched in amazement as Vorthak vessels began making tactical errors, firing on their own allies, moving out of formation, even retreating when they should have pressed the attack. They're losing coordination, she realized. Without the hive mind, they're just animals. Admiral Chen's voice came over the channel. All units target the largest superorganisms first. Those are the main communication nodes. Break their network and we break their fleet. The tide of battle began to turn. Human and Cathari ships worked together, using combined tactics that neither species could have developed alone. The humans provided the firepower and aggression. The Cathari provided technology and coordination, but the cost was terrible. Ship after ship fell to Vorthak weapons. By the time the largest superorganisms began to die, more than half the combined fleet was gone. Enterprise is down, reported the tactical officer. No response from Courage or Determination. Singapore 2 reports critical damage to all systems. Zalthara looked at the display showing the surviving ships. 23 human vessels, 14 Cathari ships, against an enemy that still numbered in the hundreds. But something had changed in the Vorthak fleet. Without their central coordination, the bioships were acting like individual predators rather than a unified swarm. They fought each other as often as they fought the Allied fleet. This is it, Admiral Chen announced. Final push. All remaining ships target the primary superorganism. If we can take out their command node, the rest will scatter. The last phase of the battle was the most desperate. Every surviving ship converged on the largest Vorthak bioship, a creature the size of a small asteroid. Its defenses were incredible, but it was alone. The human Ketharai alliance threw everything they had at it. The peaceful dawn, its hull cracked and systems failing, made the final attack run. Zalthara herself piloted the ship into the creature's feeding orifice, detonating their remaining weapons inside its body. When the superorganism died, its death scream was felt across the entire system. The remaining Vorthak bioships, suddenly cut off from their controlling intelligence, began to flee in all directions. The war was over. 3 days later, Zalthara stood in the observation deck of the human medical ship Mercy. Looking out at the debris field that had once been the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known,